2012, when Xi Jinping ascended to the pinnacle of power, his name carried a powerful prefix, the son of reformist veteran Xi Zhongxun. That title alone filled countless Chinese with hope, as if a new dawn were breaking over the country. Yet over the following decade, Xi Jinping carried out a series of astonishing political moves that dismantled much of the legacy built by his father's generation, earning a reputation as a prodigal heir squandering the family fortune. Was this the curse of bloodline, or the destiny of character? How could an open-minded father raise a son who would squander so much? The story begins on the barren Lus Plateau of northwestern China. In 1932, the 19-year-old Xi Zhongxun had already demonstrated remarkable courage and talent. Assigned by the Communist Party's Shaanxi Provincial Committee, he secretly infiltrated the northwestern army of the nationalist General Yang Huqing. With a daring far beyond his age and meticulous persuasion work among the troops, he helped launch the famous Liangdang mutiny in Gansu. In a single night, he dismantled a well-armed nationalist intelligence battalion from within, bringing both men and weapons over to the communist side and forming the Shaanxi Gansu guerrilla unit of the Red Army. That was the first shot he fired in building a revolutionary base. Afterward, like a tireless leopard moving through the ravines of northern Shaanxi, he clawed out a survival base for the Chinese Communist movement. When Mao Zedong arrived in the region with the remnants of the Long March, barely more than 3,000 exhausted soldiers, he was astonished by this young leader of the local base area and famously called him the young chairman. Without the strong Red Army forces of northern Shaanxi welcoming the Central Red Army with revolutionary enthusiasm, the first generation of communist leadership might have been wiped out long before the founding of the People's Republic. Yet without the arrival of Mao's central forces, Xi Zhongxun himself might just as easily have been executed by his own comrades. Just as the base he had built was about to become a Noah's Ark for the battered Red Army, a bloody internal storm nearly consumed him. That storm was called the Purge. Its architects were not external enemies, but radical cadres sent by the Communist Party's Northern Bureau, Zhu Lizhi and Guohongtao. They believed local founders like Liu Zhidan and Xi Zhongxun were too moderate and guilty of right opportunism. Before Mao and the central leadership arrived, they intended to seize control of the base by purifying the ranks through ruthless violence. A frenzy of internal purges began. Under the banner of rooting out counter-revolutionaries, they established a terrifying security bureau and began arresting the founding cadres of the base area. Xi Zhongxun himself was accused of right deviationism. Arrested by comrades he had once led, he was thrown into an earthen prison in Weibo. This was not a symbolic investigation, it was a real death sentence. Outside the prison, freshly dug pits reeked with the stench of decay. Rough hemp ropes tightened around his neck, leaving deep red marks in the skin. Had Mao Zedong and the Central Red Army not arrived in time to halt the purge, Xi Zhongxun would likely have been buried in the yellow earth. Surviving this near execution revealed a brutal truth to him. Internal struggles within the Communist Party could turn people into beasts overnight. The moment he walked out of that earthen prison, he made a silent vow to never persecute others for the rest of his life. Fate often turns amid ruins. Rising from the pit that had nearly swallowed him alive, Xi Zhongxun did not collapse into despair. Instead, he entered the most brilliant chapter of his political career. During the War of Resistance against Japan, he became a leading figure in the Shaanxi-Gansu-Ningxia border region, transforming the barren Lus Plateau into the Communist Party's most stable rear base. During the Chinese Civil War, he partnered with Peng Dehuai as Deputy Political Commissar of the Northwest Field Army, becoming the political soul of that elite force and helping secure the vast Northwest for the communist cause. After the founding of the People's Republic, he was transferred to Beijing as one of the powerful regional leaders known as the Five Horses entering the capital. He soon rose to become Vice Premier and Secretary-General of the State Council, serving as a trusted lieutenant to Zhou Enlai. At this stage he was young, capable, and widely respected. Mao Zedong once pointed to one of Xi Zhongxuan's reports in front of Bo Yiba and praised him. This Xi Zhongxuan, his work is now truly masterful. Yet it was precisely this mastery and prominence that made him the most visible and most vulnerable piece on the political chessboard. His lifelong principle of never persecuting others also left him dangerously unguarded against conspiracy. In 1962, a novel written to commemorate his old comrade Liu Zhidan became the trap. The book, titled Liu Zhidan, was sent to Xi Zhongxuan for review out of respect. He offered minor suggestions purely out of friendship, never imagining it could become a political weapon. But to seasoned operators of power struggles, it was a golden opportunity. The accusation was both sinister and lethal. He was said to be using fiction to rehabilitate the disgraced anti-party faction of Gao Gang. Even more maliciously, he was accused of using the novel to build a monument to himself and the Shaanxi cadres, preparing to establish a rival power base. None of this was accidental. It was the culmination of a long-brewing factional struggle inside the Communist Party. For years, tensions simmered between two blocs, the Central Red Army faction and the Shaanxi-based Red Army veterans. Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping represented the Central faction, while Xi Zhongxuan remained the final symbol of the Shaanxi faction. The first person to report the case to the notorious political enforcer Kang Xing was Yan Hongyan, a former subordinate of Deng Xiaoping. And the man who finally brought the case to Mao Zedong, delivering the fatal blow, was Deng's close ally Yang Shankin. Bringing down Xi Zhongxuan was the final settlement by the Central faction against the Shaanxi veterans. At that moment Mao himself was in a volatile mood. Earlier that year, at the famous 7,000 Cadres conference, he had been forced by Liu Shaoqi to conduct self-criticism. The resentment lingered. When the 10th plenum of the 8th Central Committee convened that September, Mao was already preparing to revive the rhetoric of class struggle. When Kang Xing passed him a note reading, using a novel to oppose the party, "This is quite an invention," Mao read it aloud to the entire assembly. In that instant, Xi Zhongxuan's fate was sealed. He plunged into a political hell that would last 16 years. In those years when truth and falsehood were reversed, he was paraded through the streets by Red Guards like livestock. The heavy iron placard hanging from his neck weighed dozens of pounds and was bound with wires so tight that it cut into flesh. Every step tore skin and muscle in agony. To force his stubborn head down, the Red Guards devised a humiliating torture, repeatedly twisting his ears until they bled and festered, eventually leaving him permanently deaf in one ear. Yet worse than physical torment was isolation. During 16 years of confinement he was cut off from the world, at times even pretending madness just to survive. But in an era when fathers denounced sons, spouses informed on each other, and everyone was forced into mutual destruction, Xi Zhongxuan held one sacred line. He never wrote a single false accusation against his old comrades in exchange for leniency. When everyone else was learning to survive by tearing each other apart, he proved through silence and endurance what it meant to remain human. History eventually turned the page. In 1978, when he returned to politics carrying the scars of those years, he did not choose a comfortable life in Beijing. Instead, he volunteered to go to Guangdong, then the most chaotic and difficult region in China. At the time, Guangdong faced the shocking mass escape to Hong Kong, as tens of thousands of desperate people tried to cross the border. The military asked whether they should open fire. Standing by the Shenzhen River, Xi Zhongxuan looked at the lights of Hong Kong across the water, then turned back to the ragged, starving people behind him. Tears filled his eyes. He said a sentence that would echo through history. "Our work has failed them. We cannot blame the people." He chose to take responsibility himself and move the guns away from the people. That choice stands in tragic contrast to the path his son would take decades later when confronted by young protesters holding blank sheets of paper. Xi Zhongxuan's political career ended in early 1987 during the political storm that removed Hu Yaobang from power. On New Year's Day, Deng Xiaoping summoned a private meeting of party elders at his home. Chen Yun, Bo Yibo and Peng all attended. The agenda had only one item: how to remove Hu Yaobang as general secretary. Days later, a so-called democratic life meeting became a political hunt. Veteran operators like Bo Yibo turned on the very man who had once rehabilitated them. Conservative ideologue Deng Likun even prepared a denunciation speech that lasted 5 hours. While others chose silence or compliance, one man suddenly slammed the table and stood up. It was Xi Jinping. Pointing at Bo Yibo, he shouted, "What are you doing? These are cultural revolution methods. This is a cultural revolution comeback. Have you forgotten that Comrade Hu Yaobang rehabilitated you?" That roar was the final flash of his conscience, and the end of his political life. For speaking that truth, he was stripped of all real power at the 13th Party Congress and reduced to an ordinary party member. He was pushed to the margins and effectively exiled to Shenzhen. Later, when Deng Xiaoping made his famous southern tour, he passed close by but never visited his former comrade. The cold ruthlessness of that political distance was chilling. The greatest irony is that the father forged an unbreakable backbone inside the brutal machinery of party struggle, while his son, Xi Jinping, grew up along a carefully paved track and developed a spine that seemed strong on the surface yet hollow within. His life story repeatedly suggests that once removed from the support of his father's legacy, he struggled to stand firmly on his own. Xi Jinping was born in 1953 in Beijing. At that time, his father Xi Jinping stood at the peak of his career as vice premier of the State Council. Xi Jinping's childhood unfolded at the very top of China's revolutionary elite. He was truly a prince of the red aristocracy. But this glory ended abruptly when he was 9 years old. Overnight, he fell from being a privileged red prince to the son of a disgraced political outcast. A few years later, the storm of the Cultural Revolution arrived. In 1966, Xi Jinping, then a first-year middle school student, was forced to abandon formal education. From that moment on, his level of schooling was effectively frozen at the level of primary education. At the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, the teenage Xi Jinping joined a Red Guard group known as the West District Picket Corps. Many of its members were the children of founding revolutionary leaders who saw themselves as the rightful heirs to the Red regime. They organized these picket squads to defend their parents' political status. Waving leather belts, they punished teachers and humiliated people labeled as members of the 5 black categories. For the young Xi Jinping, this was an early taste of the intoxicating power that violence could bring. But this so-called royalist force was quickly devoured by the very revolution it tried to defend. When Mao Zedong encouraged the rebel factions to bombard the headquarters, the West District Picket Corps was suddenly branded a reactionary organization. Children of the so-called black gangs, including Xi Jinping himself, could not escape the backlash. Overnight, he went from being one of the enforcers to a target of struggle sessions, driven into public humiliation and denunciation. This brutal reversal, from heaven to hell, etched coldness and suspicion deep into his bones. In early 1969, the nationwide "Up to the Mountains and Down to the Countryside" campaign began. As the son of a disgraced official, Xi Jinping was sent to Liangjiahe, a remote village near Yan'an in Shaanxi province. Ironically, the same revolutionary region where his father had once built his reputation. This was not his choice. It was the only relatively safe destination his mother, Qi Exin, could arrange in those chaotic times. She even wrote a note asking the village party secretary, Liang Yuming, to take care of her troubled son. Even with the faint protection of his father's old connections, reality proved far harsher than he imagined. He was bitten all over by fleas, struggled to swallow the coarse grain and bran meals, and found the backbreaking farm work unbearable. One well-known detail captured how out of place he was. He once threw a piece of moldy bread he had brought from Beijing to a dog. For villagers who had never even seen bread before, the act seemed like an unimaginable extravagance. After only 3 months, the future leader of China became a deserter. He secretly fled back to Beijing. The authorities soon captured him as an illegal returnee and sent him to perform forced labor digging sewage trenches. His father had endured 16 years of imprisonment without ever lowering his head. His son, by contrast, fled after just 3 months of farm work. The difference in willpower between father and son could hardly have been clearer. Xi Jinping was later sent back to Liangjiahe for continued labor reform. That humiliating return crushed the last traces of his aristocratic pride. He learned to lower his head, to conceal his thoughts, and to adapt. This painful transformation forged what would become the core of his political personality, perhaps not exceptional ability, but extraordinary patience and skill in endurance and disguise. This apparent transformation soon brought rewards. In 1975, the National College entrance exam had been abolished, and universities admitted worker-peasant-soldier students through political recommendation. After the fall of Lin Biao, political winds softened slightly, and the policy toward children of disgraced officials was no longer absolute. Thanks to his successful reform through labor and the red lineage that had never truly disappeared, Xi Jinping was labeled a child who could be re-educated. Despite his father still not being politically rehabilitated, Xi was recommended by his production brigade and admitted to Tsinghua University without any examination. A man whose actual educational level barely exceeded primary school had suddenly entered one of China's most prestigious universities. The phrase, primary school PhD, was not merely a joke, it was the most precise footnote to the absurdities of that era. After graduating from Tsinghua, Xi Jinping joined the General Office of the Central Military Commission and became secretary to the Defense Minister Geng Biao. Geng had once been a senior superior of Shi Zhongxun. This deep network of family connections provided the crucial starting point for Xi Jinping's political career. But China's political landscape was changing rapidly. After the Cultural Revolution, veteran leaders like Deng Xiaoping launched a plan to cultivate a new generation of red successors. Many children of senior officials were sent down to local posts to gain experience and polish their resumes. At this moment, Shi Zhongxun had just returned to politics and recommended that his son be sent to the grassroots level. With the help of figures like Geng Biao, Xi Jinping was dispatched in 1982 to begin his political career in Jiangding County, Hebei Province. From the beginning, the appointment was filled with resentment. The Hebei Provincial Party Secretary at the time, Gao Yang, deeply disliked the parachuting of princelings into local posts. Xi Jinping's mother, Qi Xian, even wrote personally to Gao Yang asking him to look after her son. The note, heavy with the scent of privilege, only angered the upright old cadre. According to reports, Gao Yang not only refused the request but exposed the incident publicly, turning the family's back-channel lobbying into an embarrassment before she had even taken office. Ultimately, however, Gao Yang had little choice. Under pressure from powerful political families, he reluctantly accepted the appointment. The concerns of this blunt provincial leader were quickly proven correct. The young princeling installed in Jiangding soon revealed a fatal weakness: lofty ambition but little practical ability. On one hand, he tried to imitate his father's reformist image by proposing to turn Jiangding into a dream of the Red Chamber cultural village to attract tourism. On the other hand, he revived the Cultural Revolution era practice of high-yield satellite fields, exaggerated agricultural experiments that ultimately increased financial burdens and pushed the county into deeper debt. As Xi Jinping's reputation in Hebei stagnated, his father intervened again. Shi Zhongxun recommended him to the reform-minded Fujian Provincial Party Secretary Xiang Nan. Xi Jinping soon left the troubled situation in Hebei and was transferred to the special economic zone of Xiamen as a vice-mayor. But problems appeared once again. She led the drafting of an ambitious plan titled the 1985 to 2000 Xiamen Economic and Social Development Strategy. In his view, it was visionary. To many local officials, however, it seemed like theoretical speculation detached from reality. His leadership style also provoked resentment. He was seen as rigid and arrogant, unwilling to listen to advice, and poorly suited to the pragmatic culture of Xiamen's local bureaucracy. The tension finally erupted at a crucial political moment. In 1985, the Xiamen People's Congress convened to formally elect the municipal leadership, normally a routine procedure in which candidates passed automatically. Yet in this supposedly uncontested vote, Xi Jinping failed to win a majority of ballots and was unexpectedly rejected. The public humiliation left a deep scar on his political memory. Years later, when he reached the very top of power, it helps explain why he insisted on receiving unanimous votes at the party's 20th Congress. His career nearly collapsed at that moment. Meanwhile, his father Xi Zhongxun was losing influence in Beijing's political struggles. The person who pulled him out of the mire was once again his mother, Qi Xing. She rushed to seek help from Jia Qinglin, then deputy party secretary of Fujian and head of its organization department. This was not revolutionary camaraderie, it was a pragmatic political rescue. Jia Qinglin made a calculated investment. After meeting Xi personally, he recommended him for a post in Ningde, the poorest region of Fujian, presenting it as a test but in reality providing protection. Under Jia's arrangement, Xi Jinping was quietly transferred away from Xiamen's political spotlight. It was a classic case of moving a troubled official to a different region to rebuild his resume. In Ningde, local officials demanded railways and ports to stimulate development. But national austerity policies left Xi unable to launch major projects. The one achievement he could present was a method he would later rely on heavily: anti-corruption campaigns. In just 2 years, 441 officials were investigated or punished in the name of fighting corruption. Political toughness compensated for economic weakness. By siding with the conservative leadership after the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests and massacre, he managed to secure his position in Ningde. With the backing of Jia Qinglin and Fujian's new party secretary Chen Guangyi, he returned to the provincial capital of Fuzhou, where he governed for 6 years. During this period, he personally designed and promoted the ambitious 3820 project. The goals were sweeping. Within 3 years, transform Fuzhou into the Golden Triangle at the mouth of the Min River. Within 8 years, achieve internationalization. Within 20 years, become a modern metropolis. But grand slogans could not hide a disappointing reality. Statistics showed that during his tenure, Fuzhou's GDP growth averaged only around 14 to 15% per year, below the provincial average and far behind the city of Quanzhou, whose growth exceeded 20%. Key development projects such as the Maui Port District progressed slowly, leaving behind numerous corruption scandals. Ironically, the massive Yuanhua smuggling case, worth tens of billions of dollars and shocking the entire country, also exploded during the period when she was a senior leader in Fujian. Despite mediocre achievements, Xi Jinping's rise continued uninterrupted. In 1999, with support from Jiang Zemin's ally and then Fujian Party Secretary He Guoqiang, and with coordination from Xi Zhongxuan's old associate Wang Zhaogui, she was promoted to governor of Fujian province. Later, as part of the factional balancing between Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, he was transferred to Zhejiang. Zhejiang already possessed one of China's most vibrant private economies. Xi largely followed the policies of his predecessors. The economy continued to grow rapidly, but this was continuity rather than innovation. His brief tenure in Shanghai revealed the real reason behind his promotion. In 2007, the downfall of Shanghai Party chief Chen Liangyu, a Politburo member and key figure in Jiang Zemin's Shanghai faction, created a political earthquake. Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin were competing over the future leadership of China. Removing Chen Liangyu shattered Jiang's succession plans. Shanghai, Jiang's political stronghold, urgently needed a new leader who could stabilize the situation and be acceptable to all factions. The ambitious Bo Xilai was considered too aggressive. The Youth League associated Li Keqiang was unacceptable to Jiang's allies. In this vacuum, Xi Jinping, whose resume seemed unremarkable, whose personality appeared cautious, and whose factional identity was ambiguous, suddenly became the perfect compromise. Jiang Zemin's powerful lieutenant Zheng Qinghong moved quickly to install him in Shanghai. During his 7 months there, Xi produced no major economic initiatives. His main task was maintaining stability and reassuring all factions that he was loyal and harmless. He completed that mission perfectly, becoming the ideal candidate in a deadlocked power struggle. Jiang's faction believed he would be grateful and obedient. Hu's faction believed he was weak and manageable. Party elders believed he would preserve the Red regime. This seemingly harmless, honest man became the perfect, controllable figure in the eyes of every political faction. Looking back over more than 2 decades of local leadership, a consistent pattern emerges. In Hebei, he was ambitious but impractical. In Xiamen, he suffered public humiliation. In Ningde, he substituted anti-corruption campaigns for development. In Fuzhou, his economic performance remained mediocre. He never demonstrated exceptional economic ability. Yet every decisive leap in his career occurred precisely at the intersection of family connections and high-level factional struggles. In the end, Qi Xin mobilized the political capital accumulated by her husband over a lifetime, the respect and networks he had earned by refusing to persecute others, to push a mediocre official, who might otherwise have been eliminated by the bureaucracy, onto the warhorse that carried him to the summit of power. By that point, the fate of the Chinese communist system itself seemed to be approaching its final chapter. That's all for today's episode. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, and share this video so our voices can travel even farther. See you next time.